But this, although painful, was only the least of her troubles as Rat's combined effort finally broke through layers of skin and muscle. They erupted into her abdominal cavity, flying up past her intestines, or in some cases simply gnawing through. The unpleasant and torturous feeling soon turned Sweetie green with nausea as her stomach buckled and she vomited, practically managing to straight next to her on the table, but summoned the gown onto herself as she could only barely lift her head to aim it away. The ensuing screams were music to Cheer's ears. And a rhyme. To Cheer's ears. And when copious amounts of blood started streaming out of the bottom of the metal cylinder, falling down into the fire with a hiss, the legs felt wobbly with excitement. As the rats continued to bite and claw their way through Sweetie Belle, their screaming softly shifted to a wet, gurgling noise. Every passing second, more of her internal organs got ripped to shreds as the disoriented rats tried to find a way out. As the disoriented rats tried to find a way out, a few of them stayed right on target as they started advancing on the upper part of Eileen's abdomen, opposite of the point where they had entered. Some of the other rats were clueless, though, as they kept going around in circles, or started off in completely wrong directions, digging horizontal tunnels of gore to Sweetie Belle. As one of the rats tore through her diaphragm, the filly's breathing became shallow and troubled, and she started taking up each of herself as she could kill the filly first. As she started taking up bets with herself as to what would kill the filly first, loss of blood or the inevitable destruction of some vital organ or the other. It wasn't long after that the filly's stomach started to bulge out, before suddenly a blood-soaked rat tore away the last patch of skin with his sharp claws and poked his head out of her stomach. Why, hello there. Hi, Sweetie Belle. Having much... Oh, God, that was you. Well, sorry about that. I'm going to scare you away now. He poked his head out of her stomach to cheerleee. The small furry critter was the most adorable thing she'd seen in quite some time, especially the way it looked around the room with its curious eyes. It clawed its way fully out of Sweetie Belle's warm entrails and made its way down her quivering body and off the table, soon followed by a dozen of his brethren as they all fled their meat container and scurried off into the darkness. The pale filly's body can fall so wildly with shock that not even the ropes were enough to hold her down anymore. She thrashed and shook against her bindings as a stream of blood flowed out of her mouth down her chin. Nails ripping through her flesh or simply getting pulled out of the table altogether. After a few violent seconds, crap, can't find where I was. Timothy throat as she let out a horrifying choking note sound, and when the filly finally passed away. I'll reread that. After a few violent seconds, during which most of the rats escaped, all of the nails had been either through her flesh or her hoof, or both. But the filly was already too far gone to noticeable care. Her body convulsed from less time as she let out a horrifying choking sound, and then, finally, the filly passed away. In the ensuing silence, the only thing that could be heard was the dripping of blood in Cheerlee's heavy panting, since the blood flowing out of the cylinder had long since extinguished the crackling flame the mare had lit earlier. A few moments passed during which Cheerlee tried to control the trembling of her body, until suddenly a soft squeaking noise could be heard. The reason for Sweetie's choking sounds told Nearly came at once. A paradise mouth opened, one of the rats forcing its way out of her throat, and climbing past her teeth to freedom. Cheerly burst at once into hysterical laughter. Still, in the throes of hilarity, when she took the stairs back to get up to the filly's uncalled dressing area. All the way up there, only one question was on her mind. Why had no comedian ever thought of this before? Death was simply hysterical. Cheerleader, probably because you let him live in a world of love and tolerance. There's a shitload of comedians in the real world who make fun of death all the time. cheerliee made her way through the backstage area, albeit a good distance away from the whole snails thing, and headed for the dressing room. After the scene with Sweetie Belle, 2 soliloquy scenes followed. One with Reginald with another key. Since she took her sweet time, the first one had certainly ended already, but as the mayor passed through the corridors leading up to the stage itself, he thought she could still hear Apple's voice on the stage. If she hurried, she might still be able to assist Snips in finding his costume for the last scene. If he was indeed as dumb as he looked and hadn't been able to find it on his own yet. As she rounded a corner, something crashed into her at high speed, causing her to stumble back a few steps as the air got slammed out of her lungs. She looked down, and she got her bearings and saw Snips sitting there on his plot, shaking his head to the spell. Heh heh heh. It's getting interesting. He just spelled the dizziness that sat on due to crash. Snips, what are you doing? You're not even in costume? You need to get ready for the last scene, she said, by way of reprimand. Sion Colt was defeated. Okerman looked hugely relieved to see his teacher. He nearly scrambled to his feet. Tears in the corner of his eyes, so he started. Oh, Miss cheerliee, it's terrible! I was looking for my costume and I couldn't find it. So I went looking for you and I couldn't find you, but I found Snail and he took a breath and was obviously struggling to get the words out. And he's dead! cheerlee's words ran into a halt with those words, cold sweat breaking across her forehead as she felt the slightest hint of panic rise up from her stomach like bile. She strayed from her schedule, and she had just found out what that would come to cost her. Her mind worked frantically to figure out the way to minimize the damage caused, to somehow soothe the cold enough so that her fans could go through. But no easy solution presented itself. Snips, on the other hand, seemed to pull himself together, turning around and taking a few steps. Come on, he called back to her. We can't continue to play now. We got to tell the others. What others? With a sudden burst of speed that had even dazzled with a sudden burst of speed that stood. It's that apostrophe D that would have dazzled even Rainbow Dash. She rushed forward, catching up to the young ponies in mere seconds. In one fluid movement, she slipped from full gallop into a full-blown karate kick, hooking all her neck into a single hook. Snips got hit good in the side, so good in fact that the kick sent him crashing into a nearby wall, at the bottom of which he fell down into a crumpled heap. She was also a black belt and kick your ass a tree. cheerliee silently thanked Rainbow Dash for all the time she had given the kids some karate lessons. Some of them had obviously stuck in her head over the years. Before the colt could do more than roll onto his back, cheerliee descended upon him like a Hulk, beating down with one hoof as she started beating him in the face with the other, in the throes of blind rage. There was one who stood between her and reaching her goal. She couldn't think of nothing but removing him from her pathway, no matter the cost. He speedily tried to defend himself, but it was a lot smaller than the mare, and not to mention a unicorn, while she had all the physical powers of an earth pony to fall back on. What is, like...
Your clothes that you left in the car.
Okay. Well, there's my jackass stepdad, yelling at me that I left clothes in the dryer. Whoops. Okay, well, back to the reading. Where was I? The beating continued mercilessly. Snip's face swelling up and blood running out of his nose down to the places where she broke through his skin. In after depression, the subconscious part of his mind reached out to natural reserves. He didn't even think he had a whole. He didn't even think he had, and his horn started to glow green with power. All of a sudden, a wave of arcane energy slipped past Cheerlee's head, leaving a long, thin cut stretching the length of her cheek. The big word, damn it. Herp. The fuchsia-colored mare gasped as surprise as blood started trickling down from the wound, which wasn't all that serious, although it did sting a little. Her gaze dropped down to the called security mark, and she realized she should have seen this coming. His specialty, obviously, involving cutting of some kind, and apparently he wasn't restricted to the use of scissors. A subtle change in the aurora around the horn warned Cheerlee that another spell was about to be flung at her. She was in no option. With no other options in mind, she raised her hook and fork, throwing it down to dish out another punch. Only this time, she didn't aim for Snape's face, but for the horn itself. As she hit her target, the colt's head jerked back, and he groaned as the horn tugged at his skull, the spell discharging into the wall behind him instead of its intended target. The magical light around the horn flickered for a moment before coming back in force, and Cheerlee just knew the next spell was already on its way. Ugh. She once again started raining down punches, now aiming all of them at the horn. Spells exploding against the walls, ceiling, and floor, left and right, sending tiny pieces of rubble flying everywhere. At first, the cult took the beating like a stallion, but as the mare hit him, the same spot time and time again, it became increasingly difficult for him to fight back against the pain that was rising in his skull. That hurts. Just have an attachment from your skull that has an escapement from the thing. It hurt you. Fight back against the pain that was rising in his skull. All of a sudden, little cracks started to appear in the horn. One final strike from Cheerlee broke it off. Then what happened? Magic exploded into the room, throwing Cheerlee off the cart and making her slide several meters over the floor, until she came to a halt a few meters away from Snips. The magical feedback seemed to have been a lot worse for the Scion pony himself, as he lay witlessly on the floor. Scrambling to her hoofs, the fuchsia mare picked up Snip's horn, and she passed it on the way to his motionless form. Clutching it between her front hoofs like a dagger, as she kneeled over him. A moment's hesitation, she ran the horn down straight into his chest, as the blood welled up underneath Cheer's hands and splattered everywhere. The colt's eyes shot open, and he stared first at his chest and then at her. "Why?" he managed to whisper hoarsely, as life fled from his body. Cheerlee didn't bother to answer his question, simply pulling the horn out of his body and ramming it back into his chest a few times for good measure, until he stopped moving altogether. Cheerlee planted heavily. Can't talk today. Can't be funny either. Cheerlee panted heavily from actual physical exertion this time, as she rolled off of Snip's corpse, trying to catch her breath. As she just lay on the cold floor, killing him like this had been quite exhilarating in its own right, even if it did all end rather fast. She looked over her own cheek, sampling her own blood for the first time, and finding it not altogether unpleasant, even if it did feel a bit strange. She was glad she'd been able to try this struggle for survival approach at least once, though. Even if her original plan for Apple Bloom and him had been 1,000 times more elegant. Oh, I want to see that original plan. The realization suddenly hit her with a sickening force. The plans for Snips and Apple Bloom. The plan required both of them to maneuver each other into the right places. Even after the next few steps also required interaction between them. What kind of plan does she have? Now that Snips was gone, it couldn't possibly work. And that was the least of her troubles. The play still had one scene to go, and Snips was supposed to be in it. The mayor began thinking up countless new plans on the spot, but she rejected all of them. Out of hand for being too ridiculous, too short-sighted, too dangerous, too risky. She began to fear the situation was hopeless. That she had finally maneuvered herself into a corner and could never escape from. She could never escape from. To keep the audience in the dark, the final scene had to go through without a hitch, so someone had to go out there to play against Apple Bloom. With no pony left from original cast, she could only count on herself. She had to improvise, and it probably would not work, but if it was the best shot she had, the only shot she had. She quickly galloped towards the dressing area and headed in the back room, wiping the blood off of herself with a rag before opening the chest that held Reginald's final costume. It was way too small for her, of course, but it included a particularly dashing brooch she could use as a fastener. Brooch, not brooch. Brooch sounds like crotch. No. Yeah, use a crotch as a fastener. Let's try that. Cheerliee quickly picked up the brooch. Cheerliee quickly picked up the brooch and continued on towards the back of the room, where several bolts of okay, you can see why I'm confused. It says cloth lay. I was about to say clay. Cloth lay stashed. She chose a black piece that was just large enough to fit around her body and swung over her back, using the brooch as a clasp in her neck to end up with something vaguely resembling of a hooded cloak. Beep 1 2 3 4 0 0 1 1 0 0 0 0 1 1 0. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. My one-track mind. It wouldn't hold up to scrutiny, but since the audience would only see her from afar, it just might do. At least she hoped. As a finishing touch, she slid a knife she found on a nearby shelf through the fabric, improvising some manner of sheath, so that the blade rested against her chest, relatively hidden. Interesting. The mirror then dashed off in the direction of the stage. Realizing she had no time left to waste, she brought up a mental map of the buildings on the fly. Figure out what exactly where she had to go for the next scene. Reginald was supposed to emerge out of a mountain cave after the king had climbed up the mountain to meet his challenge. Knowing that, Cheerliee rounded a turn and rushed up the flight of stairs, emerging at last into the dark cave, top of the mountain. From here she could see the audience, but she was quite sure the darkness still hid her from them. Judging from the fact that Appleman was nowhere in sight, she had made it in time. She quietly congratulated herself on this accomplishment. As she took a few moments to catch her breath and rest up, fearing that she may soon need the energy, it only took her a minute to start hearing the filly's voice coming closer, and pretty soon after that she came into view. Having made her way up the mountain slope, she was wearing relatively simple attire compared to the royal mantle from earlier. She had a sheathed toy sword with her, attached to her side, where she could easily reach for the pommel with her teeth. "Reginald, I've come to face your challenge. Come out and fight like a stallion!" King Golden Crown roared, looking around defiantly. Cheerliee took one deep breath and hid her face a bit deeper under the hood, even though she wasn't sure why. It wouldn't fool anyone, or not for very long at least. Swallowing back her fear, she stepped out through the cave and into the highest point of the stage. The mountain summit was located several meters above the mine Scooter had disappeared into earlier. But as it was placed all the way to the back of the stage, even the ponies occupying the front rows could still see the actors up there relatively easily. Cheerliee couldn't hear the crowd talk. Cheerliee could hear the crowd talking and whispering to each other as she stepped out of the shadows. They were obviously wondering what the hey she was doing up there on the stage. Apple herself was even more confused, as she had expected to see Snipster, not her teacher. Miss Cheerliee, why are you? She began to say quietly. I see if you calm, O brave king. I applaud your bravery. As a token of my respect, I shall face you here in my own one true form. Up to now, witchcraft and sorcery have hidden me from your eyes, but no longer. Tonight we fight an honest battle. Cheerlee's voice boomed with the complex easily going over Apple Bloom's. The explanation sounded tacky even to her own ears, but it was the best she had been able to come up with such short notice. In a sudden moment of inspiration, she gave Apple Bloom the conspirator's wink, praying that Philly would play along. Whatever the filly had assumed cheer meant by it, she suddenly grinned and nodded eagerly, as if to say, "Oh, I got it, man, I got this." Oh, friend, I knew there was more afoot than you best in my best trusted advisors. Witchcraft, this explains a lot indeed, the king responded. Appleblom's accent playing up slightly as they strayed from the original script, but the fuchsia mare could have cared less at the point. She was relieved that she was to see the other ponies playing along. 1 second, gotta stop this.